Welcome to the Divine Symposium, revealing universal pathways to joyful living. Thanks for joining us. I'm Gregory Hoag.
And I'm Gail Hoag.
And together, we have been researching and developing sacred geometry technologies for over 36 years to support the evolving consciousness of humanity and all life on the planet. We felt the inner call to bring together a collaboration of poignant dialogues with other visionary leaders whose work we love and have followed for many years. We will explore their insights and knowledge in these conversations to bring inspiration and clarity for navigating this amazing time. As we emerge from the pattern interrupt of COVID and challenges of the past year, deep-seated inner knowing will bring us forward into something new and perhaps unpredictable. Our intent is to support you on your path forward into a life of fulfillment. We have some very penetrating interviews with this series. Each one will offer you something of extraordinary value. So stay tuned each day for the next 3 weeks to absorb all you can from each of these amazing people. Every program will be available for 48 hours, and you can watch all the replays on Sunday. So let's get started. I'm so pleased to introduce you to Alan Steinfeld. He is an explorer of consciousness and has spent a lifetime searching out the mysteries of the universe. For over 30 years, he has hosted and produced the weekly television series New Realities in New York City and has reached over 20 million viewers with his programs. These include interviews with luminaries in the field of health, spirituality, and UFOs, such as Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, Ram Dass, Bruce Lipton, Carolyn Meese, and John Gray. With his media appearances, lectures, and conferences, he informs millions about human potential, remote viewing, and the nature of alien contact. For the over 5 years, he has emceed the largest UFO event in the country, Contact in the Desert. He feels that only when the inner explorations of the soul are combined with the outer adventures of the mind can we achieve a harmonious understanding of our place in the cosmos. In 2017, he received a special award from the Manhattan Neighborhood Network for years of dedicated service to public broadcasting. And the other day when I was talking to Alan, he mentioned to me that it was, I think, in 1984 when I was one of his first interviewees. And
You
so
were.
it's been a long time, Alan, and I've appreciated you all these years.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, you were. I remember it. You were setting up the metaforms at the expo, and I was just like one of the first real sacred geometry displays I've ever seen. So I had to go over and just talk to you about that and your enthusiasm and what you were formulating, which was so original for me. And now lots of people are doing it, of course, but you know, those metaforms were really a revolutionary breakthrough in understanding geometries in different ways. So yes, you were definitely one of the first people, and maybe even the first, I don't know, but you were one of the first.
An award, but now it's about you. And so I know that you've had your pulse on a lot of what's been going on in this country for a long time. And last year with COVID, putting us all into a new way of interacting and being, how did it affect you? And if there were some real gifts from this time of COVID for you. I'd like to explore that. So tell us about your last year's experience.
Thank you for asking. For me, and I know there was a lot of suffering, a lot of people ill. For me, it was a very exciting time, actually. I have to say, my experience was I got to spend more time with myself because, I'm living in New York and I'm always going out. There's a little bug in the background. There's a little lotus. I think this is the year of the lotus, actually. So I spent more time with myself because there was nowhere to go. There was no one to see. And I really discovered I like my own company and my own cooking. I really I would eat out every single night before this, at least once a day I would eat out. That's where all my money would go. Everything I had made, I go, oh, let's eat out. So, and that's a social thing in the cities, you eat out, you meet people, but forced to be with myself and to cook for myself. I really enjoyed it. And I got this assignment to do this book right before the whole COVID thing started. And I didn't have any distractions. I really was able to focus on writing this book and making it the best I could because there wasn't anyone I had to see or talk to or, be around. So it was a huge gift in that sense that I had time for myself, time to think, time to be alone, time to understand this position we are in as a planetary civilization. We're about to cross a threshold into meeting the other, whatever those others are. But there's some, and I think the COVID times, that's what we should do a little book series about, the COVID times, was a doorway. It's like a Bardo experience. Bardo is a passageway from the known into the unknown. So and a lot of people are having reactions against the unknown. They want to go back to normal. There is no normal. There never was, but now there really isn't. So it is time. And I think the beings that are out there, I don't think they created this, but they've been waiting for us to make a breakthrough, a break from the past, from old ways of understanding and start to be open to something new. That's my feeling. So it all kind of worked together to bring me to a new level of understanding myself, making contact with myself, making contact with whatever's out there, and evolve my awareness to, I don't know if I would have had the same opportunity if I was doing the same social things that people had done, or that I had done for the last 30 years living in New York. So it was a good time for me.
So, Alan, I have a question for you. So, in some ways, you were really meeting yourself at a deeper level because you couldn't be out there with all of the other things that you normally did and all your opportunities to sit and have meals with friends and interesting people. What did you find out about you that was different or surprising?
No, that's a really great question. Yes, I was making contact with myself. I learned to value my own intelligence. I was reading more books, and like Gene Gebser, I picked up the Ever-Present Origins, and Gebser was a huge influence, although he'll never admit this, Ken Wilber and Terence McKenna. Gebser set the foundation for integral knowledge. He even uses the word integral that Ken Wilber uses. And these are very deep concepts of the mind. And of course, he, influencing these great thinkers, I wanted to understand these concepts about levels of consciousness that we move through as a civilization, from the archaic to the magical to the mythical to the industrial ages, and how consciousness changes in each age where there's new values that are brought into the collective awareness. So I took that application and say, what are the new values beyond the integral in a sense? What do these others bring to us as an evolving way of perceiving the world? How do I extend Gebser's thoughts into these new realities? What are the foundations for a new society, basically? How do we, okay, we become integral, we understand there's this spiritual awareness now. How do we take that and apply it to industries, technologies? So so your question was, what did I discover about myself? It's like I enjoy these complex concepts. You know, they can be very mental, but they're kind of exciting, and merging it with a social values and kind of practical applications. Does that make sense?
It does. It
Okay.
does. So it kind of was helping you set up, sort of a gestalt of how you were seeing what we're moving into. And
Yes.
that's one of the reasons that, we really wanted to put this program together, because it's not about one person. It is a co-creation. It is marching back into unity
Yeah.
in a different kind of alignment.
Mhm.
So with what you were learning during this time, what seems different? What do you see?
That's a really good question too, Gail. I see that even though there seems to be so much more polarity going on, people want this, other people don't want that. There's this split within even the spiritual community about what that is bringing the duality to the surface that has always been there, the prejudice. And we have a chance to resolve the oppositions and come towards the center. I'm not sure how we're going to do that, but in a way, it's all out on the table. There's no hiding agendas anymore. And we have to see that if we're going to meet each other and move somehow, and I don't have the answers for this, cohesively into the world we've envisioned, me and Gregory back in the 80s when the ascension movement was really happening, and the planetary and the Gaia theories and all those things were coming into formation. And now they're sort of acceptable in a sense, they're like given, but in those early days, there was an excitement about that. And I think that excitement is now taking a practical form. It's not just theory. So how do we emerge as a new planetary species is what don't have the answers, but looking and asking the questions, right?
It's very interesting. You're talking about a book. The book that you've written is about making contact. And yet, and we think of, just like you went out to get meals and we're going out or having it come in, the contact. But the thing that we can do is not really dependent on anyone else at first, but it's our own internal consciousness raising that we need to work on. And that's really what started happening for you during COVID.
Yes.
And I think part of where we're going is, how do we work, each one of us, on raising our individual consciousness beyond what has been as far as the time. It's like a sense of, how do we move into a level of communion with our full soul being? How do we improve our intuition,
Yeah.
improve our multidimensional beingness? Because we are multidimensional beings playing with this 3D reality, and you're talking about a potential 3D contact that is going to have multidimensional
Right.
interactions and expressions and effects. So Let's talk about that.
Well, it's not just the 3D contact that we are about to embrace. It is the multidimensional aspect of who we are as human beings. So we need to understand our own multidimensional nature if we're going to meet the multidimensional phenomena that's out there. Because I don't think these beings, whoever they are, and lots of people have names for them and whatever, but I don't put a name because it's something. But they are meeting us in the multidimensional form. They are not, in my experience, they're not physical in the ways we think physical are. I can go over there, shake your hand or whatever, but they're more, I think some of them are physical in an elevated physical space. So if they were to come into our reality, we would have to shift. And that's part of the trauma that happened that John Mack, you know, our old friend John Mack would look at, what trauma people would have in meeting these other beings. But as we become more sentient, more lucid in these multidimensional realities, these dream type states, we can meet these beings on an even playing field so we can learn more, gather more. The making contact is the equality that we, being ensouled beings, a higher conscious mind as potentiality, needs to be activated in the exchange and the embrace of the other. So it's trans-physical. We are physical beings, but look at us. We know we're not physical beings either. You know, we have all been through the spiritual schools for the last 30, 40 years saying, and this is underestimated in the West because a lot of people still think of the West. I'm talking about the mainstream as being mechanistic, linear, you know, ego-centered, but we all have been working on this other level outside the mainstream where we've developed a spiritual culture, right, Gregory and Gail? We can talk about these concepts that, you know, it might be foreign to a lot of the American public, these kind of ascension, transmutation, all, but to us in this little, you know, bubble that we've created, and we really have created this, you know, really since the 80s. It all kind of, there was the Aquarian age in the 60s and all that, but since the 80s, and you know, our friend Frank Alper was talking about that, and we have the same birthday, me and Frank had the same birthday, and you know, these visionaries that came forward that built this foundation of this, let's call it an ascending culture, we have now a common language, and this is now, I think, being filtered out more and more to the mainstream, and yoga is possible, health food is everywhere, all that's conscious sort of vehicles that we were pushing for now become part of a larger society. But I'm saying we built a foundation where we can realize that we are spiritual multidimensional beings and embrace these others on that level in a sort of more mainstream way.
Yeah, you know, I love where you're going with this. And so we've had, you know, 30, 40 years of doing this work. There's a lot of people stepping in now, and young people that are going through an upgrade pretty quickly.
Yes.
And so in order to be able to access that interaction with those beings and higher knowledge and, you know, guides and angels and all that, what do you suggest? What do you see that people can do to raise their frequency, to be able to prepare for this next level of humanity?
Well, I want to say, just in answer to the first part, yeah, there are star seeds being born that are already aware of this knowledge. It's like giving like a 3-year-old this iPhone and they already know how to work it. You know, it's like so they're coming in, these generations, with this advanced framework based on the stuff that we laid out. But for the people who have no idea, or are open at least to this, I would say, trust your own consciousness. It's not just contained in the body. Project it out into space. Project our divine presence out there. This is what this CE5s are calling it, Close Encounter 5 meditations that people have been doing. You get into this space of quietness and connections with the cosmos, and things show up. You do, and you can call them in. Those there seem to be closer than ever. You know, sightings around the country have been up. It's been 100,000 reported sightings in the last 10 years. There's been a book called The Desk Reference for UFO Sightings, but that's just, I would say there's at least 100 or 200 more unreported sightings that go on. So, and more every day. So this separation that we've probably been quarantined because we're such a kind of animal-based race. We have these animal bodies, and we have that kind of warlike mentality. So we've been quarantined, basically, maybe for our own good. And when contact started to speed up after the atom bombs were dropped. This is what some people say. Jacques Vallée says this, Linda Moulton Howe says this, because it's just not a regular bomb, which is awful, but these atom bombs rip holes in time, space. And that alerted the rest of the local civilizations out there, like, we got to check out what these guys are up to. They've disrupted the balance of nature. So, I mean, there's no way to prove that, but definitely sightings have been up since the end of World War II, since the atomic blast, and also recently in the last, I don't know, I would say at least 10 years, but less this year. There was an article in the New York Times where it said more New Yorkers are seeing things in the sky. That was last year's article. So the veil between these worlds and the separation between the multidimensional realities, I think, because they are multidimensional, is really thinning out. And all you have to do, really, if you want to make contact, is go out there with an intention, drop into a place, trust your intuition, because lots of people are getting downloads, right? Downloads is now part of our common vocabulary. Well, they're getting downloads from these beings or their higher self. So we have to start trusting our minds. I have an essay, and just to tell people, this is a collection of essays, this book, and because no one has the whole truth, so I got what I feel were the experts in the field. And I have an essay by John Mack. Even though he died 20 years ago, he did such powerful work in saying, if you're having an experience, you're not crazy. These are real emotional interactions on some level. So what John did and still doing with his influence is letting people trust their own experience. In the West, we've been doubting our minds. If you have a vision, if you get a download, if you hear a voice, you must be crazy. That's the old paradigm. It's like, well, maybe you're not crazy, but we, psychology has done us a great service in, looking at our own motivations, but it's done us this disservice, like in understanding how expansive human consciousness is. So I'm saying, trust your psychology, trust your impressions, trust your intuitions, trust what the deeper mind, it's aware of all creation, is trying to tell the limited conscious mind. And this is the shift. This is what actually, also this time alone, like I started to trust my own creative process. And like, it took me a long time to write the introduction to this book, which I'm offering for free to anyone who wants, and you can get it from the download. But I had to trust the creative process of pulling in information that at first didn't have a place, but I knew it had some kind of place, and then kind of weaving it together. So we have to trust our own minds again, like the ancients did, if that answers your question.
That's great.
And as long as you just brought it up, that is your free gift. Why don't you just speak to that again so people understand what you're offering as something they can tune into after they're watching this?
And the name of the book is Making Contact. So,
Right.
Alan, tell them a little bit
It's
about
called
your book.
it's called Preparing for the, well, the main title is Making, and there's a little asterisk in that title. Making asterisk Contact is the real name, but people just say Making Contact. The subtitle is Preparing for the New Realities of Extraterrestrial Existence. And it has 11 different essays, including my own, about the leading investigators in this field. But they're not just thrown in there, oh, read this essay and that essay. I start with the external. I start with someone named Nick Pope, who worked for the Ministry of Defense, and he is just looking at the nuts and bolts physicality of this and why governments cover up and why they don't tell us what we all should know. I mean, I don't agree with everything he's saying, and that's why I put him in there, because I didn't actually agree with it, because I wanted this to be multi-perspective. I don't have the answers to what's going on. I have my piece, and these other people have their piece. It's like a mosaic. If you look at a mosaic up close, it doesn't look like anything, but the reader, after looking at it from afar or integrating all these chapters, gets a little sense of what this situation might be about from a multiple perspective. So it's multidimensional in a sense, the book, and it takes us deeper and deeper into the integration of consciousness. So I break up the book into 4 categories. I have the investigators, which deal with the hardware. Then you have the researchers that look at the effect on human beings. These are people like Linda Moulton Howe and John Mack's included in that. And then I have the abductees, the people who have had these intense relationships or intense events happen in their lives, and they've been traumatic. People like Whitley Strieber is in there. His book Communion was a big breakthrough. And then from abductees, I go to contactees, where people seem to have integrated the experience of meeting the other in a much more evolved place. And I have to say, a lot of abductees do end up becoming contactees. I mean, these are sort of arbitrary labels that I kind of created from the literature and from meeting people, but it's a progressive integration. And in the last chapter, I talked to Carolyn Cory, who's very integrated with these ETs that visited her at 5 years old. And she's sort of, in a way, merged with some of these higher qualities. So that's what the book is about. And what I'm giving away is the introduction, where I sum up what everyone's giving us. It's sort of like an overture. You know, you have the piece, but before the piece, you have the little overture, which is an encapsulation of little different sections of all of that. And so this is a 30-page, and it took me a long time to write how I was going to integrate all these different points of view. So by reading the introduction, you get a good, and it's free. I'm sending it to Gail and Gregory free, because you're watching this program, to just get a taste. And then if you like the taste, maybe you'll go out and get the whole meal. That's what I'm hoping. So, but even if you don't buy the meal, the taste will fill you up enough to kind of get you in touch with what the next level of, I think, our reality is going to be. This is why the government, there's so many, I'm sure you've seen the news and the media and what the government's rolled out in the preliminary assessment of UAPs, and of course calling them UAPs instead of UFOs. I have a theory about that. But anyway, did that answer some of your questions?
So why don't you, for some people that are still stuck on UFOs, tell us what a UAP stands for.
Well, before there were UFOs, or they were called UFOs, they were called flying saucers. This is something that Kenneth, what was his name? Kenneth, not McDonald, but anyway, this guy, I forgot his, but he saw flying saucers skipping over Mount Rainier on its way south. Kenneth Arnold, that was it. Kenneth Arnold, 1947,
Right.
saw these saucer ships, and he called them saucers because they looked like they were saucers skipping along. And that was in June 24th, 1947. That hit the news. Pilot sees flying saucers, and there was right after World War II, people were kind of excited. There was a boom. And so that term flying saucer was used when whatever crashed at Roswell was identified, and it was flying saucer. Okay, flying saucer crashes at the Roswell Ranch. And so that was a common term for whatever is out there in the sky until around 1953, where the government started to study this. Project Blue Book, there was a bunch of different studies that we never see. So flying saucer, they said, that doesn't really say it. Let's rename this as unidentified flying object, because they were unidentified flying object. And I do write in my book, like, people think they know what they're seeing when they identify something as unidentified. That's how ridiculous that is. So, oh yeah, I saw a UFO. Like we know what that is. We don't know what that is, but it's so actually it's something Charles Fort used to say. We bridge gaps of our ignorance with terminology, which we think, it answers it. It's like calling something junk DNA. It's like, oh yeah, it's junk DNA. It's like, that does not say anything. It's like, we have to watch our labels and understand that we don't want to substitute labels for knowledge, and that's key, I think, in understanding this phenomena. Oh yeah, they're alien. Well, you just can't say stuff like that. So anyway, and there was a study in Britain called the Condine Report, where they thought there's more than just objects in the sky, flying objects in the sky. These things, and actually in our own recent studies with the ATIP program, if you know what that was a government-sponsored program from 2007 to 2012, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which was sponsored by Harry Reid, which started this whole disclosure ball rolling. That's really what got this going. And they borrowed this term from the British Condine Report and saying, well, there seems to be time-space distortion that happens. There seems to be a synchronicity that goes along with seeing this. It seems to be telepathic impressions that go along. So this was not just objects in the sky. There's a phenomena. So they rebranded this, because UFOs were getting a kind of bad, kind of like hokey kind of term. Unexplained aerial phenomena. That's what UAP is. UAP, phenomena, which is the plural for phenomenon. So this is a phenomenon. The government actually gave us a hint about what this thing is really about. These are not just objects. Like, there's a famous line from Jacques Vallée, who was one of the early investigators. He's still around. He was portrayed in Steven Spielberg's movie Close Encounters. He was the Francois Truffaut character. He was the French guy. Anyway, Jacques Vallée is French. He used to work with J. Allen Hynek, and he would say, and if I find out these are just visitors from another planet, I'll be very disappointed. That was one of his saying, because this involves consciousness. These are not just objects. There's relationships. When you see a UFO, Grant Cameron says this in the second chapter of the book. Grant says, and he's one of my favorite investigators, he says, if you see something, you were meant to see it. There are no innocent bystanders. If you've had an experience, you are entangled with the phenomena somehow, and you are part of this. So I'm sure you guys have seen something, have had some experiences, because you're doing the work. And so anyone out there, even reading this book, you're part of the phenomena. So read the book, because it's somehow, I didn't know the government, and the publisher definitely didn't know that the government was going to release these reports. And I happened to meet him, meet this editor who gave me this book. I came forward with the book. He says, no, I want you to write this book. And so it was all kind of perfect timing that it came out at this time, because it is a preparation for these new realities. And that's the subtitle, that we are emerging into. And the preparation is also just the awareness. And the government coming forward. And if you saw the 60 Minutes program with Luis Elizondo, who used to work for the Pentagon investigating this, he says to Bill Whitaker of 60 Minutes, who's Bill Whitaker, you know, very straight-laced reporter, says, so are these real? Is this true? And Elizondo says to Bill, come on, Bill, we're already past this point. The government has admitted UFOs are real, meaning they're not ours, they're not Chinese, they're not Russian, and they're not some all of a sudden little third world country that's developing these high technologies that can change direction at high speeds and do all these things and go down to the surface of the water and zoom up. There is something else in our airspace, and we got to get used to it. And it's not a threat because there's nothing threat. The only threat there is to our own ego sense of superiority. That's the threat. These objects and the intelligence behind these objects, you know, threaten our this. We're at the high. We're the smartest guys on the block. We're at the top of the food chain. All these ideas that humans, no matter what culture you're in, the common sense of humans is, yeah, we can domesticate animals. We can control the earth. You know, of course, it's gotten out of hand and we've stopped making contact with the earth. But yeah, there's these more intelligent beings out there. They figured stuff out that we have yet to discover, which is sobering and exciting. And that's why I'm so enthusiastic. Just think of the potentials this interaction can give us in biology, sociology, technology, cosmology, all these fantastic fields that are just opening up. So,
wow.
Okay.
And I want to jump in for a minute because I love where this is going. And so this intelligence has been brought into our awareness for quite a while, you know, since World War II, and possibly a lot longer than that, I'm sure. However, here we are in modern times, and we have this opportunity. Let's talk about the opportunity. So much of what I see us moving into is co-creation, collaboration. And when we get to a place where we are, you know, more and more people are opened to that multidimensional awareness, to their intuition, to trusting what they hear and feel and see. And they start opening more to even greater applications from, you know, other beings. It's, you know, it seems like phenomenal. Like, you know, we could really deal with a lot of the issues that we've got going on this planet right now.
Yes.
What do you see? What do you see?
Well, I see they're not going to clean up our mess for us. You know, we can't go to say and just take all the plastic out of our oceans for us and stop the nuclear power plants. And we've created a mess. We have to clean up our mess. It's like your mother telling you, clean up your room before you have company. That's the sort of message we're getting here. I mean, maybe they could just take care of it. And I don't think they're going to let us really destroy the planet. But the opportunity here is to welcome the other, clean up, you know, environmental change and whatever's causing that is the main threat. And it's also the main thing that's going to pull us together as a planetary civilization, because as we saw with the COVID, you can't create an artificial boundary in the sand that makes it, this is your country and this is your, there are, you know, like John Lennon said, imagine all the world, imagine no country. That's my philosophy. It's like, there are no arbitrary divisions. That's what the astronauts notice when they look back at the Earth. Well, wow, we're on one planet. So if we can recognize that, and the two issues that are bringing that to the forefront are the UFO thing, whatever you want to call it, and the climate change. We need to come together as a planetary civilization because we're one race of beings, at least the humans, and we are very connected to each other, and we are one mind and one consciousness, and we need to know that in order to meet the others. In the epilogue of my book, maybe I could offer that at some point to you guys. I quote Bruce Lipton in an interview I did with Bruce in 1999. I can't say I discovered Bruce, but I knew of him before he published any books, before he was the big rock star of the spiritual scientific movement, because he really is phenomenal. I mean, I just read one article about Bruce in probably 98, and I went and sort of tracked him down to wherever he was living in Northern California. And he sat with me, he didn't know me, but sat with me for 3 hours and explained, yeah, really nice. It was a really hot summer day, and we sat in his living room, and he went through his whole anti-Darwinian theory, like there are no chance mutations. That is not the engines of evolution. When it's intentional mutation. It's Lamarckian, where species yearn to improve their gene pool, and there's this sense of consciousness impacting the evolution of the genome, because we want, our children to be smarter and to have more. And that is the essence of an epigenetic structures that evolve human beings, because that's where we're at, and we're about to take a leap into a whole new level. But one of the things that Bruce said, and I put this in the epilogue of the book, is that humans have to come together, realize we're one species. Consciousness is one, universe is one. He says in this epilogue, we do not have humanity. We are not humans, he says, until we have humanity. This is one being coming together to share consciousness. That's humanity. That is the synergy of the mind, of the collective mind, coming together, create a wholeness. That's where we're at. We need to create this sense of oneness in order to evolve our conscious plane to the idea that there's really just one person, one being here. So there's one of us here. And the illusion is that we're separate, just like maybe the cells in your body think they're separate, but they create a synergy of awareness. That was a key phrase that Bruce pointed out to me in 1999. Synergy of awareness means, look, we all have all these multiple cells in our body, trillions of cells with their own will and individual function, but they come together to form our individuated consciousness. They all come together. All your brain cells are functioning to take in these words or to say what you're saying. There's a synergy of awareness, but the greater synergy of awareness happens when all of us come together to form the being of humanity, so humanity can speak as a oneness. And it doesn't happen if we still think we're separate,
Beautiful.
It is so powerful to realize that we could be on the cusp of another major jump in evolution.
Yes.
Just as when the single-celled amoeba or whatever started to cooperate to create a multi-cell being, we're at that point in really opportunity for humanity to start to step into the multi-dimensional aspect of a species that is working together consciously.
Right. And you know what illustrates that perfectly, and it's kind of like ancient history, but Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey. You have that embryo in space that is the collective humanity. And think of what that movie shows us, that we have to overcome the artificial intelligence of how that wants to do away with the humanness. And we need to find that resource to overcome the artificial intelligence. And I have a whole theory about that. And to find our humanity, to birth the new human.
Right.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
And another thought that I've been having while we've been sharing is, that sacred geometry is the universal language.
Yes.
That means that when you're working with number, pattern, rhythm, cycle. You could go to the other side of the universe and communicate with a being in such a way that, you know, this is always this, and this, and this, and the way these work together to make this, and
Mm,
what this does to represent the body.
yes.
And, you know, so it's been really interesting for the last, gosh, now it's been over 40 years of my life, almost 50, where I've been focusing on a universal language and understanding it. And it has started to move me into those expanded levels of consciousness.
And you've moved everyone who's interacted with metaforms into that. And because you're one of the foundational people in the, you know, sacred geometry movement, you've somehow integrated this into the language, into the collective, you know, and that we can speak in these forms, in these metaforms. And I think this is also how the ETs communicate with us. It's not through words, it's
Mhm.
through forms and symbols and intuition and structures of consciousness, which is what you demonstrate. You're demonstrating structures of consciousness. When you put these things over, you're structuring the thought form frequencies in such a way to get an impulse that will create an energetic effect in the body that will transform the human being.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
that's one of the things that over these years we've been so focused on, is that this is a way that vibrationally shifts people's field. It shifts their consciousness. It shifts what they're capable of, what they experience. And I believe that this time right now is particularly precious, that the more that we support people in moving into that higher resonance
Mm.
through things like sacred geometry and lots of different tools and all the things that you speak about, that is how we're really going to move into this. We're going to integrate it, because we will move into this one way or another.
Mhm.
However, if we can do
Kicking
it,
or screaming or not,
that's
yes.
right. However, if we're trusting, if we're using tools, and if we're working together, if we're collaborating and co-creating, then that frequency, that energy field just keeps becoming more and more capable of moving to that next level.
Right. I think we were kicking and screaming this last 2 years. You know, this is what the upheaval, and with the metaforms, with the ascension technologies, whatever you want to call this shift in frequency, it's an inner experience. These forms you guys work with, it brings us into aspects of ourselves. And I think if we go in, the further we go in, the further we go out, you know. But most people just go that far in and that far out, and like everything's normal, and let's just watch the football game. Nothing wrong with that, but I'm a little bored. I'm a little bored with the past, and that's why I'm excited about the possibilities that, like I said, Gregory, everything we've created and set the foundation for since the 80s, or maybe before, but that was my jumping in point. It's where I jumped into the pool. It's like this was a new culture, and this is where I think we can emerge into as this planetary civilization, as this, and of course, there's still huge amount of problems and wars and awful things happening. But I think, you know, Western minds, and of course, a lot of the indigenous people, I went and stayed with the Aborigines in Australia, and they are the most spiritual people I ever met. And they just live that spirituality, even though they've been so abused by the Europeans, awful. But the ones I met were just at peace, you know, and they're in touch with the greater realities, the dreamtime realities. So there's indigenous wisdom that is offered to us. I mean, John Mack's last book was Passport to the Cosmos, where he talks to the indigenous people. And so this right brain awareness, which is, you know, the intuitive, the pattern seeking perception, you know, the left brain will only get us, as Einstein say, from A to B, but your right brain or the imagination will get you everywhere else. So he didn't put in left and right brain, but he said, you know, the linear mind and the intuitive mind. So we need to go everywhere else, because the linear, mechanistic, Newtonian, Darwinian, whatever you want to call it, has backed us into a corner where the only way out is in, right? And that's what patterns and geometries tune us into. There's a pattern to the universe. There's a pattern to the phi ratios. There's patterns of life. And the more that becomes a common science, the more hope. That's why I like your stuff so much, because the hope is that we can recognize the structures of creation and work with that to create this new reality. So.
It is such an exciting time. And, you know, I think that's something everyone listening to this needs to take to heart, is that we are always given the opportunity in every kind of circumstance to either shut down or not work with it or expand with it. It's
Right.
like what you shared, what happened for you, you discovered Alan and you liked him, and now you're expanding on him. And, you know, that's the most I think each one of us can do as a first step, is discover ourselves
Mm.
and like ourselves and love ourselves enough to then move into the opportunity that's being presented. We
But we have,
always have that choice.
but we have a choice, but we have to overcome our own roadblocks, our own obstacles. I got into this whole thing when someone presented channeling to me. They said, you know, there's this housewife from Tacoma, Washington, and she transforms into this 35,000-year-old warrior who marches around, answers people's questions. So I was coming from a psychological perspective, coming out of college, and I thought that was the most ridiculous thing. This woman is obviously acting or delusional, and I didn't quite think it was a reality until I went to see Ramtha. I'm describing Ramtha Jay-Z Knight, and I had to overcome my limited beliefs about what was possible. And that's what I think a lot of people are confronting with the UFO thing. Like, if this is true, how come we haven't been told this? This is what a lot of people say. Well, I've never heard about UFO. I mean, yeah, it's something you see in movies, but this can't be real. So those are the obstacles of belief. And I had to overcome this idea. Could this woman really be, and I still don't know, channeling this 35,000-year-old warrior from Atlantis, but I went with an open mind. And in that audience, one of the things Ramtha said was, you know, and I know channeling is like the everyday phenomenon now, but in the 80s, it was kind of like, really? Does that really happen? But now it's like sort of acceptable. But back then it was like, so what Ramtha said is like, everyone wants to look at the mystery here, what's coming through this woman and her little body. But the bigger question is what's coming through you? Where does that life force come? Where does your voice emerge from? Where do those thoughts come from? That is the bigger mystery. And when I heard that, I said, okay, that started to shift some things. Maybe I'll listen more to this. And then Ramtha called on me and said, what say you, beloved entity? How be you this day in your time? And I said, what? Are you talking to me? but then I sort of had this mystical moment where things sort of started to get fuzzy and my consciousness had changed. And I felt like there was this other level, and I wasn't being hypnotized. It was just like, oh, I'm seeing another level of reality here. And that's informed me really, in a sense, ever since that moment where I decided, okay, I'm going to open up to whatever could be possible. I'm not saying it is possible. I'm saying maybe it could be. And just by removing my own obstacle for what was possible, welcomed in a world of mystical revelations. And I think a lot of people go through that because we're so trained in our culture to block those things out. And I think everyone has a moment. It's like losing your virginity. It's like everyone has a moment where they made that connection. Not everyone, at least everyone in our little tribe here has that moment where they said, oh yeah, because most of us are brought up very, dogmatically, traditionally. It's only science. There's no spirit really, even if you went to church or wherever, there's really, until you have your own experience, which is then it all changes. And it could be a dream. It could be what we're saying here today. It could be putting on a metaphor, like, you sit in some of those pyramids and it's like some people start to feel things they never felt before in their etheric subtle bodies. And they say, what is this? How can I be feeling something that's not physically touching me? And like, those are moments. I'm sure you guys had activated lots of people, and that's why you're doing it, of course. So I'm just saying everyone has that moment where we have to get out of the way of the old self, because people could say, well, I'm feeling things, but I'm just making that up. Or they could say, there is a subtle body. I'm feeling the subtle energies and maybe it's real. And maybe if I let go of the fact that I'm just my physical body and there's more. And when they do that, it's like, oh my God, I am feeling energy. Maybe I am energy. Maybe I can transfer energy. Maybe I could receive energy. This is the limited beliefs, all of us. And I think the world itself with these UFO videos are coming to confront the limitations on thought form realities that we've been conditioned and programmed and brainwashed to believing, and experience, which is why metaforms are so powerful, because you're giving people the experience to break through. And, wisdom is different than knowledge. Knowledge is from the book. Wisdom is from experience. And when you have the experience and you trust the experience that, wow, something's different. I can feel things. I'm aware of things. That is experience that say, well, maybe there is this thing going on that I can open up to. And then you become the mystic. Then you enter the school of initiation and you search out the mysteries. I mean, Ram Dass had it, well, first with LSD and then meeting this incredible teacher in India. So it's like mystical essence is the destiny of humanity, because we're all mystics, unless we don't wake up to that, but we are. What is incarnation, right? How did we get into these bodies in the first place? And so when you have this experience where you're out of the way and you let something in, then you start to become a seeker. And I say, they used to say there's a seeker born every minute, but there's when the seekers become finders, seek and you shall find. And when you find, this is Gospel of Thomas, when you find, you will be disturbed. And when you are disturbed, you will change and reign over all. That's the Gospel of Thomas. So it's like the old self, and this is what's happening within the military, within the government, within those that never believed in UFOs before, they are becoming disturbed. Because reality is not what they've been told it is. And that's a good thing, because it's never what you think it is. Anyway.
Wow, Alan. Oh my gosh. I love this conversation
You've
so much.
inspired me to I don't usually talk like this to people, but I know there's a receptive field there that allows whatever wants to come out of me to come out. So
I love
thank
it.
you.
I
Yeah.
love it. And it reminds me that, unfortunately, our creative selves have been sort of like tamped down for so long. And one of the tenets of being creative is to let go of that judgment,
Yeah.
to instead trust, to move into that connection with intuition where we are inspired and it is pure inspiration that starts to move through us.
Right.
And that is what we're moving into. And the
Yes.
more that we can support each other to say, yes, this is normal, this is natural, this is good. And this is part of, when you were talking about, like it's like we're birthing the planet again. And, Barbara Marx Hubbard, who we love dearly,
Yes.
spoke so much about that. And that was her calling, was to share that. And we are birthing a new planet, and it is different. And so the more that, as you were so beautifully speaking, the more we let go of that old paradigm, those old beliefs, those limitations, that little box that we've been in, and welcome ourselves to this big world of who we are, and allow that the creative expression that is pure inspiration.
Right. We're birthing a new planet, but the planet's also birthing us, because it's a sacred being. It really is. I mean, it's really alive. I mean, just go out and see what grows on this amazing planet. Good planets are hard to find. I'll tell you that much. A good, beautiful planet like that. And, I think there's life abundant in creation, but just think of what this paradise, this oasis in space offers our species and all the great species of this planet. We do have to be rebirthed as a species on a new planet, a new heaven and a new earth. This is what we're caught between, the UFOs and the environmental changes that are happening, that we need a new heaven and a new earth. That's what I feel will wake us up, because we're the bridge between heaven and earth. So let's become a new species.
Yes.
With just our own creativity. Yes, Gregory. Yes.
No, earlier I was thinking about when you were talking about UFOs, an acronym and so forth.
Right.
And you mentioned that 95% of our DNA is supposedly junk, but that's what science has labeled it. But the amazing thing for us to realize is this is potential. These are, all the potential building blocks for where we're going. And it's a matter of having the consciousness to turn on the right aspects of our being to allow us to evolve more quickly into the larger interdimensional, multidimensional being that we really are.
Yes, let's hope that we do that. And this about DNA, some people say DNA is actually older than the Earth itself. So we came from these DNA forms that were just maybe out in space to create us as an evolving species. We're evolving, we're changing, we're transmuting. We're, a race of very interesting, creative people that want more, that want this greater potential, this greater art, this greater awareness, this creativity. It is very exciting what we can create as beings, rearranging our reality somehow. Yes.
It truly is. And, we could probably go on forever,
We
because
could. We should.
We're going to do this again.
Yes.
And I want to again, allow you to speak just real quickly about your book, and that there's a way that they can purchase it through Amazon. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So the book, this conversation was really exciting for me because you're so open and allowed me to touch into my creativity. And this is part of what I relay in the book, because I was with myself, who are now I liked myself before, but now I really like, not in an egotistical way, but I'm more comfortable just being alone and with my own process. And then the power of that was like, I was alone by myself. I went in, and now I'm putting this out to the world, which it's being received in a mostly very good, positive way. So like, that's a lesson for me in like, oh, I had to go in, do that work, and it was fun. And now put that out. That inner work is now externalized in a good way and being received. So it's like my inner is being received by someone else's inner, and the outer is just the vehicle for this exchange. Isn't that interesting?
Mhm.
It is. I love it. I
So,
love it.
um,
I love it.
so my book traces a lot of development. What does it really mean to be truly human? How are we non-local? How are we here to open up our minds? Because part of what I put out there is maybe we are actually extraterrestrial. Maybe, we are different than all the animals on the planet. We have these animal bodies, but what makes us human is this consciousness mind. And maybe that is actually off world. Maybe that's not from here. Maybe that didn't evolve from apes and all that, but maybe it was implanted by whatever, or Anunnaki, or whatever you want to call it, or ourselves, our divine selves, which I think took lower forms in order to embrace the physical as creation. And consciousness itself is the divine aspect of the human being. So, and that's not localized to a planet, but maybe it is alien to the animal form. Alien maybe is not the best way of saying, but it's not organically produced by the mechanisms of the brain, but actually, near-death experience, out-of-body experiences show that there's more. And so if we're the aliens, we have, in a way, free reign over the universe. So I talk about that in the book, and talk about Linda Moulton Howe in this book, who's one of the best researchers I found, talks about how if we are not told the truth by our governments, we are an enslaved and abused race. And so we can't wait for the government to tell us the truth, but we have to find the truth for ourselves. But we also have to demand the truth, because maybe not for us, we don't need that consensus reality, but for a lot of people, for this to become real, they need somebody to say, guess what? We have company. And so the book takes us through a progression of how we go from this disconnect to the connection. John Mack talks about changing our worldviews. Whitley Strieber talks about a new level of sentience that we need to have in order to meet these. We need to know more of our own mind. We need to know what we're thinking. Who are we when we fall asleep? How is this part of the greater consciousness? That's a practice I've been doing. If you asked about practices, and it's not just a UFO thing. It's like, as I watch myself fall asleep, what are the thoughts and downloads and awarenesses? And that's also your most creative time. I have to force myself to get up and write down those ideas that come to me in those kind of hypnagogic states. And I'm glad I do write them down, because that's how Edison would come up with his inventions. He would sleep with a weight in his hand, and when he'd go into that altered state, he would drop the weight and he would be in this state, and these ideas would come to him that really, Tesla and Edison, they revolutionized the world. So anyway, these states of consciousness I go into in the book about these dream realities, and let's welcome these other realities, natural realities. I don't think you need to do drugs anymore. I think drugs opened the door in the 60s, but we've gone through that door. You don't have to keep going back and through the door. The door is open for us to access higher consciousness on our own, multidimensionality. So the book takes us, I think, on a journey from singular, 2-dimension, 3-dimension, into multidimensional awareness. And that's my hope for the reader.
Wow.
So you can get it on Amazon. Go to Making Contact Alan Steinfeld, and there is a discount on Amazon. Get it on Amazon. It improves my ratings. Write a review after you read it, and tell people if you like it, of course, and get the free introduction from Greg, Cory, and Gail. So
Great. And we'll have that on the page, so everyone will have an opportunity to easily access that. And I want it now too.
yes,
I
you
love
will
it.
love it. You
Hey,
both will.
I will. I will. Oh, Alan, this has been so much fun. I
Well,
love
it's
this.
so much fun to interview an interviewer.
Well, you
It's
got,
about time.
I don't really talk this much. You are inspirational. Maybe it's the metaphors. Maybe it's whatever. Maybe because we've known each other for 40 years or something, right?
Well,
Yeah.
you need to be given that chance because, this is a new aspect of you that is stepping out. And for each one of us, I think it's inspirational because each
Thank
one of us can find that new aspect within us where we can start stepping out and become more than what we were. And the nature of these times, it's in all honesty, it may not get easier before, you know,
It
before we
does.
go through more stuff. And yet it's our choice, always our personal choice of how we're going to deal with the way reality is enfolding us. Are
Right.
we going to take it as with you? So it's like everything is choreographed in your life, in my life, such that each moment is an opportunity if we choose to look at it that way.
Right. And that's our choice. And making contact is a choice. It's an inside job, I say, making contact with yourself, with the earth, with each other, and what may be beyond our scope of perception, but yet is knocking on our door. It is awaiting our discovery. It really is.
Truly. Ah, to be continued. We love it.
Definitely. I really enjoyed this. Thank you. Thank